Year 2013. Investigative journalist Claire Rewcastle-Brown was sitting in her London apartment searching for the next big story. She had already uncovered corruption, deforestation, and political scandals in Malaysia through her Sarawak report. But now, she was looking for something new. That's when her Malaysian contacts informed her of something bizarre. The Ministry of Education was preparing to recommend a film for school children, but it wasn't an educational tale, or even a children's fantasy. It was The Wolf of Wall Street, a film rated X for violence, nudity, and drugs. Officials claimed it could teach children about greed and immorality. Soon, Claire discovered this was no innocent mistake. The orders were said to come directly from Rosmah Mansor, Malaysia's First Lady, and the wife of Prime Minister Najib Razak. But why? Najib Razak was born into power. His father, Tun Abdul Razak Hussain, was Malaysia's second prime minister, and his uncle, Hussein On, succeeded him. The Razak family projected themselves as a dynasty. They were so powerful that people called them the Kennedys of Malaysia. Privilege and influence were part of Najib's daily life. He studied abroad at the University of Nottingham in England, and when he returned in the 1970s, his political career began at the young age of 23. He quickly became the youngest deputy minister in Malaysian history, later rising to chief minister of Pahang, and eventually holding cabinet positions in defense, education, and finance. By 2009, Najib would finally fulfill his family's destiny by becoming Malaysia's sixth prime minister.
Being sworn in before the king, Najib Razak becomes Malaysia's sixth prime minister and takes over a job some say is one of the most troubled in Asia. He has the difficult task of uniting a country and improving the image of a party beset by rifts and defections.
But becoming prime minister wasn't enough. Najib needed to win over the people. And he did. Not just with his image, but with promises that touched everyday lives. Families received direct cash assistance through BRIM. Middle-income Malaysians finally had a chance at homeownership through Prima. Even students benefited through book vouchers that helped ease the cost of education. For millions of citizens, Najib was delivering. There was food on the table, money in hand, and new opportunities for the future. Everything seemed perfect, but Najib wanted something bigger. A project that would define his legacy. That project was 1MDB.
Prime Minister, you've introduced the concept of One Malaysia. What is One Malaysia to you?
One Malaysia is about a sense that we are together as one people.
In 2009, Najib launched One Malaysia Development Berhad, or 1MDB. It was a sovereign wealth fund designed to attract foreign investment and finance long-term projects that would modernize Malaysia's economy. The vision was bold. Build world-class infrastructure, develop renewable energy, expand global partnerships, and raise Malaysia's profile to rival financial hubs like Singapore and Hong Kong. At first, 1MDB appeared to be living up to its promises. It caught the attention of global banks and foreign governments. Billions of dollars flowed in. Partnerships were announced with companies in the Middle East, and high-profile projects that captured headlines in Kuala Lumpur were glowing. One of the crown jewels was the Tun Razak Exchange in the heart of Kuala Lumpur, marketed as a new international finance district that would rival hubs like Singapore and Hong Kong. Another was the redevelopment of the Sungai Besi airbase in Bandar, Malaysia, a vast mega-project promising to reshape the capital city. 1MDB even partnered with the China Railway Engineering Corporation to make this project a reality. Ordinary Malaysians believed in the vision. They invested in the 1MDB fund because they saw it as a way to build their nation. And more importantly, they trusted it as the face of the government itself. And Najib was everywhere, cutting ribbons, announcing deals, presenting himself as the architect and public symbol of Malaysia's future. But behind the cameras, behind the speeches and headlines, someone else was quietly pulling the strings. A man most Malaysians had never heard of. A man who would soon become one of the most infamous figures in global finance. the hidden puppet master, Zhou Lo.
As a lot of you in this room know, I like to plan my evenings and make sure that I always go to the best parties.
Zhou Lo was unlike anyone else around 1MDB. Educated in elite international schools, he understood how money flowed across borders. He played the role of financial advisor, but also party king. But more importantly, he was a close friend of Riza Aziz, the stepson of Prime Minister Najib Razak. And that's how he became involved with the fund. From the very beginning, Zhou Lo positioned himself as a middleman. He wasn't officially on 1MDB's board, nor did he hold any title that suggested direct authority. But behind the scenes, he was securing all important deals. One of his earliest achievements was the Petro-Saudi joint venture. Using his Middle Eastern connections, Zhou Lo introduced 1MDB to the Saudi oil company. Under his deal, 1MDB would invest $1 billion in cash to secure a 40% stake, while Petro-Saudi would take 60%, with its oil and gas assets valued at around $1.5 billion. For Malaysia, it seemed like a pathway into the global energy market, expanding the country's footprint well beyond Southeast Asia. But Zhou Lo wasn't done yet. He knew how to bring in big players who could push 1MDB's ambitions further. In 2012, he set up a partnership with Abu Dhabi's International Petroleum Investment Company, backed by the royal family. This connection gave 1MDB global credibility, enough to catch the eye of giants like Goldman Sachs. Zhou Lo was securing these deals for the growth of 1MDB and Malaysia. But what defined him was his crazy and expensive parties. Whenever he organized a party, he was surrounded by stars.
Surrounded by the likes of Leonardo DiCaprio and Paris Hilton. Bradley Cooper went to a lot of his events. Robert De Niro was there, Kanye West and Jamie Foxx.
Zhou Lo wasn't just partying with Hollywood stars. He was building connections. Along with Riza Aziz, he co-founded Red Granite Pictures, a production company that took the risk to finance Martin Scorsese's The Wolf of Wall Street. But how was he doing that? 1MDB was initially created for the development of Malaysia, but too many foreign deals were raising some red flags, and Claire was observing everything. And as she dug deep, she found something that changed the whole story. Javier Justo, a former Swiss banker and Petro-Saudi director, told Claire that it was all an illusion. The 2009 Petro-Saudi deal, Zhou Lo's first so-called big success, was fake. On paper, Petro-Saudi owned multiple oil reserves in Turkmenistan, but it was a big lie. And that $1 billion from 1MDB, within days, $700 million was secretly funneled into a shell company called Good Star Limited, controlled by none other than Zhou Lo himself. Claire also found that in 2012, Goldman raised $3.5 billion through bonds for the fund, supposedly backed by Abu Dhabi's International Petroleum Investment Company. Just a year later, another $3 billion bond followed, tied to a joint venture with Abu Dhabi to finance Tun Razak Exchange. On paper, these looked like bold strategic moves, but in reality, Goldman Sachs charged Malaysia nearly 10 times the usual fee for arranging the bonds, over $600 million in commissions.
Goldman Sachs played the classical, stereotypical, caricatured role of the greedy banker.
But why would Malaysia's government-linked fund agree to such staggering terms? The answer was becoming clearer. The money was never meant to stay in Malaysia. A large part of these funds, Claire would discover, were siphoned off into offshore accounts, luxury properties, private jets, and Hollywood films. By this time, all the pieces were clear. So Claire published everything in Sarawak Report. To suppress the truth, Malaysia's government struck back quickly. Sarawak Report was blocked inside the country, and Claire herself was branded an enemy of the state. Javier Justo, the whistleblower who handed over Petro-Saudi documents to Claire, wasn't spared either. He was arrested in Thailand, accused of blackmail, and forced to serve 547 days in prison without any proper investigation. Meanwhile, Jolo disappeared from the spotlight, becoming a fugitive. But the world couldn't ignore him. Investigations opened up across multiple countries. Billions in assets were frozen or seized. Everything from art collections and luxury real estate to private jets. Back in Malaysia, the political landscape shifted. Voters rejected Najib's coalition, and by July 2020, Najib himself was convicted on 7 charges, including abuse of power, money laundering, and criminal breach of trust. He was sentenced to 12 years in prison and fined 210 million ringgits. Even in the United States, the Department of Justice stepped in. Tim Leisner, a former Goldman Sachs banker, pleaded guilty to money laundering and conspiracy. He was sentenced to 2 years in New York prison. Goldman Sachs itself faced heavy penalties, paying $3 billion in fines. So, apart from Jolo, everyone faced their criminal fate. But the question is, can it ever repair the damage done to the Malaysian people?
In a lot of corruption cases and money laundering cases, there is this perception sometimes that these financial crimes don't have victims. And that really is not true. Someone still has to pay back these bonds. The schools that they were going to use it for, the hospitals, the infrastructure, the economic development that they really wanted to do is not going to happen now.
Jolo and Najib destroyed the hope of a nation with their corrupt schemes. But they were not the only ones. Watch our previous video on Alan Stanford to figure out how he ran a fake bank for 25 years. See you in the next video.